multimodal sensing to complex event detection and health applications. So thank you very much.
Oh, I think it works fine. So, well, when I planned this talk, I was quite ambitious. So I thought, okay, let's first take a look into earlier work which we've done in the area of real-time heart rate protection, and then transfer over to using these insights and going ahead and looking into how to use sensors for complex event processing in ambient assisted living. I think due to the time and everything, I probably will spend most of the time to the first topic. Well, I mean, what we are seeing today is that there are more and more different kinds of sensors that we will not have only on the body, but also in the body. And on the left hand, you see two examples from my colleagues in a different research group in our department, where they have developed a glucose sensor which is implanted under the skin, or impulse, short-range, high-precision radar, which can be used to do non-intrusive observation of health parameters. And what we see on the right hand is, of course, only a half. I didn't have a picture from a 3D accelerometer that is being developed at the University Hospital at Oslo from colleagues there. And they have implanted this sensor on the heart of the patient and collected a lot of data from this sensor. And we worked with them afterwards together to use the data in different ways than they did. And that's kind of one of my main important things. Now, I think I would like to challenge us, since we have the TPC meeting based in multimedia. So, can one ask, what sensors to do with multimedia? Well, maybe it's trivial because all multimedia input devices are, of course, transferring or converting analog signals to digital so that we can process them. So that's one thing. But I think even in the first case you will see the heart rate prediction. What we did there is basically a kind of cross-layer adaptation of a complex event processing system to enable stream synchronization for dynamic window adaptation and having strong temporal dependencies. But I mean, this is just open for discussion, so I would like to get your feedback afterwards. So, first up, we have done a lot of work with data stream management systems. I think most of you know what they are. So basically, they look from the outside for the user like a database system, but you don't have any hard disks there. Instead of, typically, there are some data feeds, including sensors attached, and queries are just loaded into the system and are continuously processing then the incoming data streams. So everything has to be done more or less in main memory, and of course you cannot wait until the stream is finished. So you need to have certain windowing techniques to do some blocking operations over the data stream. But one very important reason of these systems, like the success of database system in itself, is that they provide a declarative interface to the application developer. So we don't have to say how it's done, we want to say what we want to have. And that's something which is very important. And in the work I'm presenting here, we are using ASPO, which is going one step ahead, and also doing complex event processing. Now, our medical colleagues at the University Hospital, they're doing a lot of research, and they studied now how they can use the data, the output from this 3D accelerometer that is implanted on the heart of the pig, as I said. It's placed on the left ventricle there, and they found out that they do certain transformations, first moving the data into the frequency domain, and then afterwards calculate the Euclidean distance between a reference vector, RB0, to the current vector, so the data sample they receive, and to look at them over a certain window. They can actually identify when certain circumstances come up that can indicate a starting heart attack. So basically it's an occlusion what they identify. And the way they work with this method or work is that they had the sensor connected to a storage system, so they put everything on hard disk, and afterwards they feed the data from the hard disk into MATLAB and running the analysis over this and identify what has happened here. And that was for us the starting point to say, look, why don't you do this online? Why don't you use some kind of data stream management system? Of course, they haven't heard about this, and that was kind of the starting point for us to work with them together. And the first experiment goal, what we see here, was really to show them or to find out, can we now using this kind of ESPA system to do real-time analysis and achieve relative or the same results than the offline analysis. So that was the first step, and I will show you afterwards the results, but before that, I go also into the goals of the second experiment. And for the second experiment, it was interesting for us to see, you have maybe noticed that the window the medical people used, and in our first experiment, was fixed size. Most data stream management systems and complex event processing systems are using fixed sized windows. Now the interesting thing is our heartbeat rate is not fixed size, it's changing. And on these slight variations might have an impact on the result. So the challenge we saw here is, can we use the heartbeat rate to determine the window size so that we calculate for every heartbeat the algorithm again and pushing the window instead of having just one fixed size sliding window here. And of course, in order to get the heartbeat rate, we need some additional data. And this data we got from an ECG system. And there we can use something which is called a QRS detection algorithm. So if you see on the right hand the figure, there's this spike starting in the bottom with a Q. On the top of the spike is the R, and then at the bottom again the S. And this QRS signal basically is indicating the heartbeat. In every heartbeat you have this. And we were using this to identify now and trigger the window size for the calculation. That means we did the fast Fourier transformation over a sliding window of a variable size. Now, we needed a different data set because in the first experiments, which we also published already in 2008, they didn't have at the same time connected an ECG, so we had to have a different data set. Therefore, also the figures look afterwards a little bit different for the different two experiments. So, in general, challenges we met was, of course, okay, fast Fourier transformation and all that stuff is not by nature supported by data stream management system. However, it was relatively easy to just develop a custom aggregated function to use this within the ESPA system. Now the hardest thing was really, ESPA has fixed size windows. So there we had to really open up the box of this system and changing certain things to enforce the changing size of the window, or to enforce the operation over the window we define here. And then a third problem was synchronization. I mean, the detection of QRS takes some time. In the meantime, the samples from the accelerometer come in, and we need to synchronize them, of course. So we have to add basically the delay from the 3D, or we had to add delay to the 3D accelerometer data stream to have the correct synchronization here between these two data streams to do the calculation. So as I said, this fast Fourier transformation was just a Java-written custom aggregate function, and then we developed, of course, also again we developed the QRS function and calculating the Euclidean distance. So this is straightforward, basically, and we use now the ECG stream to identify the QS event. And this is, in the figure you see in the bottom, the stream from the top to the bottom. And on the left inside the system, we are pushing the data from the 3D accelerometer. So at each detection of a QRS event is now defining the window and the calculation. And we had, of course, as I said, to introduce also the delay here. And this we did that we moved in front of the system a FIFO queue, which we manipulated with respect to delay, and which we then used to enforce the calculation of the window. So that boils basically down that we have on the right-hand down in the illustration, we have the aggregation, where we use a trigger and aggregate and calculate whether we identify an occlusion or not on the data stream from the 3D accelerometer. And the QoS detection is used to manage the FIFO queue to have the right input in the right timing-wise here into the system. So here you see now the results from the first experiment, where we compared the both approaches, the offline approaches and the online approaches. And you see both of them in the figure. So you see only one line, so they're overlapping perfectly, so that's fine. So that's not an error, so that worked really fine. And I mean, in the green box, what you see is the CQL statement we are used to do this calculation. And this is nice for the people doing medical research, because they are able to write SQL queries, and they are able to change this. They are not able to program in-depth certain things, but this is useful for them extremely to have this declarative interface. Okay. You see that the occlusion was detected after 80 seconds, and then there was a perfusion, so the blood flow came back at 170 seconds. Now, how do these medical guys do these experiments? I mean, they want to see something like this to be able to detect this. Well, they open up, of course, the pig, and then they just put pressure on the arteria of the pig, so then there's, of course, an occlusion somewhere. So it's manually introduced, actually, these artifacts here, as part of their research. Now, here we see now the results from the second data set. And the two lines here, the one in bold is the beat to beat, so that means the adaptive window size algorithm, and the other one is the first one. So we have this fixed size window. And what you see here is that the variation is extremely high with the fixed window size compared to the beat to beat solution. So that means basically the precision we achieve here is much higher with adapting to the actual heartbeat rate to calculating. Well, there's a sudden drop here also, but this was just noise in the experiment. Another framework falling down. So what could we see in these studies together with people from the university hospital? So I think they were very happy to have such tools where they have a declarative API and can use it. Well, what we could also see is you can do this on vanilla PCs in real time, so there's no big deal to do this. And basically with a public domain complex event processing system where we had to change something to achieve this adapting window size. But the adapting window size gained really in much improvement here. So, and based on, you can say based on these insights, for example, the importance of a declarative interface to enable domain-specific experts to design their system on their own to a certain aspect was also the motivation for our further and ongoing work in the area of ambient assisted living, where it's also not the computer science person that is defining, for example, what are the typical daily activities, what should be recognized, and those people that define the system would just like to do it in a declarative way. And the work and the approach we did there, just a very brief look into this, is that we kind of wanted to model away a lot of the differences. I mean, you have one installation in one home, next home is very similar, but well, it might be a little bit different, the person is a little bit different, so you want to kind of have on the high level, it should look like the same, even if it's in the bottom different. And therefore we looked into modeling the environment to be able to place sensors and using the concept of location of interest. So we define which area is of interest for you, for us, close to the stove or something like this. And this location of interest concept can then be used to select automatically from the system the proper sensor that can sense the certain event that is requested for this area. So that means the application programmer has just to say, okay, I want to detect a certain event at this location, not how and not through this, which sensor and so on. Another problem I cannot really go into depth now is how to really model the different sensors we have, ranging from sensors giving integers as output to video cameras, then running complex algorithms on the video stream like face recognition, object recognition, or whatever else. How can we model this in the system that this can be fitted together and integrated by the system more or less in runtime? And these were a lot of interesting challenges, and for those that are Monday at TJ watching, I will talk more and more about this. So, and I think everybody's hungry now, so I have finished my presentation, and thank you for the attention.
Any questions for the speaker?
Why was it so longer used to detect the heart attack instead of just
Well, I think that's more a medical question, of course, but I think the method they had was the best method to predict heart attacks they had in the medical domain. And then the step from our work was the first time done in real